Good morning and welcome to MACMH's Community Podcast Series. We're here to inform, inspire, and support. I am the host, Twana Anderson, the Community Engagement Director, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in. Here, we invite our partners to join us for a conversation about their organization's service to the community, any challenges that they face, and their future plans, all the while weaving throughout ideas that will help you have an impact on a child's mental health journey. Today, we welcome Morning Glory Montessori. Just a few notes before we get started. We are streaming this episode live, but it will be available anytime you feel like learning something about children's mental health and the community that serves them. If you enjoy this podcast, please help spread the word. Also, during this episode, we may make reference to books, articles, and other information that will support the knowledge that you'll gain during our time together today. You'll find those links below in the description, along with contact information for our guests so that you can stay connected. I want to encourage the audience to respectfully ask questions for our guests in our YouTube chat. We can see those on our end. We'll keep an eye on things and we'll see if our guests would like to answer any questions if we have time at the end of the episode. The Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health has a mission to promote and pursue optimal mental health from infancy to young adulthood. Every topic of this podcast is approached with an open and critical mind, exploring opportunities to view circumstances through a different lens. Being in this space means that we advocate for all children to have equal access and opportunities to develop the skills they need to nourish their lives. We begin to help others remove their blinders while we're also being challenged to remove our own. We need to see other people, appreciate their perspectives, and perhaps even learn from their journeys. Engaging with community is what I do for MACMH, and this podcast is something new that we're doing to share our partners with you. We are a professional development organization. That is truly our jam. We provide excellent educational opportunities to providers and educators, offering continuing education online in our training series or through one of our 2 leading annual children's mental health conferences. We also recognize the need to provide our resources in a different and unique way that reaches everyone. You may have thought to yourselves, a podcast is not very unique, and you're correct. But whether you are a parent or a caregiver, a relative, or friend of a child or young person who may struggle with their emotional awareness, we hope that sharing our resources with you in this way will become a valuable tool for you. So now, this is the 4th and final episode in this series, and we'll continue to center our conversation around infant and early childhood principles used by Minnesota's Montessori family, how they nurture and support children's mental health, as well as the staff serving their students and their very distinctive connections to the community. Now, today, my special guests are Jessica Lynn Jackson, known affectionately as Pastor Jess, and Reverend Dr. Timothy Philip Jackson. And then we're being joined again by Nora Springer from the Montessori Center of Minnesota. I'm going to bring Nora in first, and then we'll bring in really the 2 main folks who are going to come in with us. So let me bring Nora in. Hey, Nora.
Hi, good to be here again.
Nice to see you again. Nora is a licensed social worker and the director of outreach for the Montessori Center of Minnesota. She provides mental health consultation, social emotional intervention support, and resources and referral services to Cornerstone Montessori community, and then to partner schools, which we're going to talk about today, in their in MCM's initiative, Montessori Partners Serving All Children. Welcome.
Yeah. I'm excited to be here for this conversation.
I
It's been
know.
been a great 4 episodes. I'm going to miss you next week.
I know. I don't know how I'm gonna go have my week without you in it, Nora. And before we bring in Pastor Jess and Dr. Jackson, I just want to say thank you because you really were instrumental in pulling all of this together. You're that string, that's kind of connected us all. You've reached out to everyone and really got all the interest that we needed to do this podcast series. So Nora, I really, really appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for providing this platform for us to be able to share the work and our stories and really pushing me personally outside of my comfort zone. This has been terrifying yet really exciting and fun. So this has been a fun partnership. Thanks for giving us the space.
Well, awesome. So now listen, Pastor Jess and Dr. Jackson are phenomenal human beings, and their biographies were just amazing. It just took me through so many emotions. And their actual bios will be in the description, but I'm just going to do something really short to bring them on the screen, and then I want them to just tell us all about themselves. So Pastor Jess is a visionary servant leader, problem solving, institution building, passionate educator, social entrepreneur, and seasoned professional. Her vocational and professional journey reflects her various passions, God-given talents, and decades of service to community as an employment discrimination attorney, professor, mediator, circle facilitator and trainer, executive leadership coach, organizational development consultant, and ordained minister. Yes, snaps. Dr. Jackson has a special passion for reaching men and sees their transformation as the key to healing families and impacting communities. His prophetic message of truth, balanced with grace and laced with humor and infused with down-to-earth real-life wisdom from his nearly 30 years of business experience as a seasoned commercial printer. Pastor Tim is also a gifted musician and worshiper in spirit and truth. A genuine man of faith. He is committed to sharing a message of liberation to his community. Wow. All right, so let's bring them on. Let me make sure, first of all, that I have the right setup here for us, all right, let's bring in Pastor Jess, Dr. Jackson. Hello.
Hello. It's good to be with you.
Welcome.
Yes.
Welcome. I am so excited to have this conversation with you all today. When my family first moved to Minneapolis, my son was 4. He was in preschool. He actually went to a Montessori school that was inside of St. Andrews. That's adjacent to Loring Park. My daughter was 6 when we moved here and already in kindergarten. So we had to transfer her in. She started elementary school at Lucy Laney. I don't know if you guys have heard of Lucy Laney, but that was the school that both of my children went to. And I remember the first day we came, and it was still back in St. Anne's then. Like they hadn't built the big school. It was still small. Loved that part of it. It felt so much like a Montessori school then. But there was this young boy who was kind of waiting in the lobby when we first got in. I looked at him and was like, oh, hi. I didn't really think anything of it. But come to find out, he was sitting there waiting to be reinstated from being suspended. Like suspended from kindergarten. And I was like, okay. I didn't even realize that you could be suspended from kindergarten. So that was kind of how I was welcomed into how young Black boys are treated in our public school system. So I am so excited to have this conversation with you all because I feel like the work that you all do really reaches out and embraces young boys like him instead of making them the problem. So before we jump in, Pastor Jess, Dr. Jackson, tell us a little bit more about your journey, how you got here, all of that wonderful stuff that I did not read because I wanted you to be able to tell us yourselves.
Well, I can be a crybaby sometimes, Tawana, and starting with that story took me there. And I think it's the most important thing about how we got here. Because that's why we're here. That little boy and so many other little boys, including my own grandchildren, are the reason why. And, with all of the resume, bios, and introductions that, are fine about who we are and things we've done. In my case, I think it just shows that I didn't have clarity like Molly at a young age, or even Nora, to know what I'm supposed to do. So I've done 10,000 things in, almost 60 years. But until I got to this place, which definitely feels like where I'm supposed to be, and a sacred mission, and a calling now to Black children. So, I mean, there's a lot that I can say about our story and how we got here. There's a short story that is tied to the church, that maybe I'll have my husband, he can share how we started the church and knew we wanted a school, and that was 20 years ago. But we didn't really start planning for it until maybe about 8 years ago. But then there's a much longer story that really is where the roots, like a tree. We see the trunk, we see the branches and the vines, and that's kind of what today represents, I think. But the roots go much, much deeper and date back much further, and have to do with my mother and her legacy as an early childhood trailblazer in this city. So it took me a while to maybe listen to what God had for me and get me to this place, because growing up in an early childhood environment with a mother who was the director and founder of an early childhood center in North Minneapolis, La Crèche Early Childhood Centers, there was nothing that I saw myself doing less than being in a space with children all day long, like the one that I grew up in as a home away from home. So I'll just stop there. Again, maybe throughout our conversation, different aspects of the history of how we got here will pop up. But I would say that you really started us off with the most important reason and why we are here, which is those little Black boys that are being suspended, that are not being seen, that are not being understood, for the beautiful contribution that they have to make to our humanity, our globe, and wherever they are. They are seen as problems, and not the gifts from God that they are. So thank you for starting us there, because that's where we need to be.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jackson?
Tawana, thank you for, first of all, I want to thank you for having my wife and I on the program. Hi, Nora. Just a shout out to the Minnesota Center Montessori Center, and Molly O'Shaughnessy and all the work that they're doing over there. My wife, Pastor Jess, I have joined her in this sacred mission, as she joined me in the sacred mission of our church, our ministry, and impacting our community. And as my wife shared, we see our work as a moral and justice imagination, reimagining a space for our children to grow and to be nurtured, not only grow socially, but intellectually, psychologically, and most importantly, the spiritual formation of the child. And you brought up Lucy Laney. I served there as a servant volunteer, as a paid scholar, and I would work with children, kindergartners, and go in and read. And I saw the challenges that our children are faced in these spaces where culturally their culture, their personhood is not valued or understood. And often our children, Black children, are forced to fit into social norms that are somewhat antithetical to their personhood and their development. And when they are forced to fit in these I should say, culturally unresponsive environments, their personalities are formed and shaped into an image that is antithetical to the creation story, who God created them to be, these unique, beautiful, sacred bodies created in the Imago Dei. And so I joined my wife in our justice imagination. She has, just totally taken over Impact Living Ministry, and we see that space as a learning environment for our children. So I am super excited. My motto is blue collar to scholar. I spent 30 years as a commercial printer. I started at the bottom and worked my way up to become probably one of the first African American master commercial printers in the state of Minnesota. I transitioned off of that job to take a full-time position at our church. I was bivocational. My wife and I, we both were bivocational, and immediately enrolled in college, in school, to finish up my undergrad work. And then I finished that up and did my master's of divinity at Luther Seminary. And then I finished my doctoral studies at Wesley Theological Seminary in DC.
Right.
And so I've been on this 10-year journey, academic journey, and I'll say
we've been on this 10-year journey.
yes, we've been in community. I'll say this, and then I'll pass the speaking symbol back to our Tawana. I've been on this 10-year journey, and I'm super excited to present my work. I studied Howard Thurman, who was a mystic. He wouldn't call himself a Baptist preacher. That was his historical context. And so I'm bringing his work, his theological philosophy and pedagogy into the learning space, which centers on four themes: God, the self, which is the child in this context, and the educators, nature, which is Montessori, and then community. How does that move out? What does that look like in community with the other and your neighbor? So that's just a little bit of something about my work. Super excited to be here and to share a little bit more, and just thank you for having us.
Thank you for being here. Wow. Just, I find myself all the time just trying to connect like my story to your stories. First of all, Pastor Jess, the fact that your mom was such a pillar in the community with the creche, like we all know about that early learning center. And I did not know that you had that connection. And so I would appreciate if you would kind of tell us a little bit more about that. And then y'all didn't know, but both of my parents are preachers, like ministers. They have their own ministry. It was called Fans for Jesus. That's how I grew up in the Baptist church. But then, my dad, I think, realized along the way that maybe the way we felt about God and believed what church should be didn't quite line up to the way our Baptist church was doing it. So then they went and did their own ministry, Fans for Jesus. And we just always had so much fun with that ministry. We were able to do something. So
I'm also a PK.
This is PK. Yes.
I'm also a pastor's kid.
I was going to bring that out. Like, Nora, you got to, I didn't want to out you, but
No. But I think that's like when we talk about connection, that's really like that was something where I felt an immediate familiarity with you two, was that understanding of not just community, but church community. That's really rooted in showing up for those in need, showing up for each other, and doing all you can to make the world a better place, rooted in social justice and equity. And that's the kind of church community and family that I grew up with, and also where you all are as well. So that vision and mission really aligns with me in a very like personal family values sort of way, which is why you get into this work that's like really rooted in our whys and the community. So
and Nora always knows what I'm thinking and where I'm going. like the conversation was going to you, Nora, so that you can tell us about your connection with Morning Glory and what made it unique within your program and what connected you to them, because our theme for this year is harmony and connection. And so I'm always going to talk about what that means. And so if you can, and I know you just did it very well there, Nora, but dig just a little bit deeper in how you found Pastor Jess and what was it that really stood out besides that connection as being a PK?
Yeah. Well, Pastor Jess found us, and I actually came into the relationship after she had already met Molly and was in training. I started working here. I think you were maybe midway through your training that year when I started. So I came in kind of the back end. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of the Montessori Partners Initiative is it's very like, yes, we are going out and talking about it, but people are coming to us, and it's very grassroots in that way of people saying, oh, that's what's going on. No, I want that for my community. And I think what Pastor Jess and Dr. Tim have done so beautifully is really also cultivated a movement within their community to really build that trust and understanding of what they're doing and why, and being part of that journey over the last few years with them and their church community has been incredibly powerful. And I really believe that it's that's where the transformation happens. That's where like the systems change that we always talk about happens. And that's where like the human spirit thrives. And so, you know, there's been challenges along the journey. I'm sure there's going to be twists and turns, but you two are both so rooted in your why and have such a strong commitment to community that I know Morning Glory, I mean, it's already had a profound impact on the community, but not just for these Black boys and their families, but I truly believe it'll be transformational for the social fabric of our larger community, our larger Montessori community, but like our larger Twin Cities community. And that's really, really exciting to be alongside this journey with you all. So,
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Nora. Yeah. Pastor Jess, go ahead and just tell us then what that journey has been. Because when you have amazing partners, and even specifically that partnership with Nora, who has that real deep connection and feeling that, and knowing, I want to say that the knowing of what y'all are going to bring or what you're bringing to the community. Please just bring us up to speed, how you got here.
Yeah, it's a rich story and journey. As I said earlier, we knew we wanted to start a school. And so we brought, about 8 years ago, we said, it's time. Let's think about what kind of school we want to start. And we brought a group of people together, and it was a pretty eclectic group, coming from different experiences and backgrounds and cultural backgrounds. And we started brainstorming about what kind of school we might want to start. And one of the people had lived in South Africa, and had been involved with a school there called African School of Excellence. Another person in that brainstorming group was a Montessorian. She was a friend of a friend, didn't know her very well, but was brought into the conversation. And she was working in Florida at a Montessori school that served autistic children. And when the Montessorian from Florida saw videos and information about the African School of Excellence, she said, you know, a lot of what they're doing is very Montessori in spirit. Even though they were serving older children, the principles and core values that were driving a lot of what they were doing, and the wonderful outcomes that they were getting with some of the poorest children in South Africa appeared Montessori to her. And so I was like, okay, what's that? And out of that conversation, I was told I should meet Molly O'Shaughnessy and go to the Montessori Center of Minnesota. And the minute I walked in the door, it was kind of I can talk this way because you're PKs. It was a Mary Elizabeth moment, like something leapt in me. And I said, I want this for our children. Because if you've never been to the Montessori Center in Minnesota, you don't know absolutely just how beautiful the thoughtfully prepared environment is.
Yes.
From Cornerstone School, the training center, and then the museum that has some wonderful information about Dr. Montessori's life and journey. And so something leapt in me before I even met Molly. Then, as Molly and I sat down and talked, and it came out, who my mother was, she said that she knew my mom. She had met my mom. Because my mother, many years prior, had converted one of LaCreche's preschool classrooms to Montessori. Now, I remember that I was about 6 months, I was working at LaCreche at the time, as part of a startup Way to Grow team. So I was actually the Way to Grow startup director. I hired home visitors and was doing all of this work to help launch the Northside Way to Grow program. But I was 6 months away from law school. So my mind was on law school. I'm going to do what young lawyers think they're going to do, change the world, take over the world, whatever. And so I was not thinking about this Montessori classroom that Mom had created, but I remember the guides. They were different than the other teachers. One was East Indian, the other one was African American. I remember the materials that were different than the other classrooms. And unfortunately, I didn't ask enough questions because, again, I was thinking about other things. So when Molly said that she had met my mom, had been in that classroom, and had actually had some trainees engaged there, it was a very divine moment. And I knew that what was happening was kind of ordered steps for me, and the relationship that was birthed with Molly and the Montessori Center and Nora and everyone else there, that it has been a beautiful example of what community can do in collaboration. And so, you have met Molly, so Molly is very, what's the right word? She can be persuasive. So this was mid-August. So it was kind of around the same time of the year, just a little further into the summer in 2018 when I was meeting with her. And she said, "Oh, you want to be the head of school? Well, you need to get trained." And I was like, "No, that's not really what my plan was. I was going to be the head of school. I'm going to bring my administrative and legal and organizational development and all of these other, kind of skills to the table and work alongside those who would be in the classroom with the children." She said, "No, you need to get trained." So 2 weeks later, I entered primary training. It was 9 months long. It was harder than law school. And I don't say that to discourage anyone that might want to do it, because it was of all of the various educational environments that I've been in, and I've been in quite a few diverse environments, some that are seen as, cream of the crop, even in the country. Coming from North Minneapolis as a little Black girl, I would say that the 9 months that I spent at the Montessori Center in that primary training were the most impactful educational investment that I have made in my life. It was healing. It was holistic. It answered questions as a parent, as a grandparent. It rooted me in a hope that quite frankly, looking at the educational system and the journey for Black children, I just didn't have. I wasn't, I was hopeful about what we might be able to do, but then connecting with the Montessori pedagogy and the people at the Montessori Center, starting with Molly and then Liza, Nora, and everyone else that has been so impactful in our lives and in our journey at Morning Glory.
Yes.
It was transformative and it was divine. So that was 5 years ago. And as soon as I graduated in May 2019, the vision for Morning Glory began to refine itself as we centered on Black boys only, or at least Black boys initially is how we think about it. And our mission to create a safe and nurturing environment that will also be an empowering refuge for little Black boys to be inspired and affirmed and supported to become who God has created them to be. So again, I could say a lot more about what the journey from there to here has been. And we are still very much in the midst of some of the components and challenges of that. But we are finally now at the point of opening our doors. This yeah. So we are very excited about really now finally bringing all of these pieces together and opening the door. And as Nora said, I'll say this and then I'll rest. You know, even in my anxiety and impatience over these past 5 years of wanting to open the door sooner, and we've even had children and families that aged out, like you talked about, your daughter was already 6 and already in kindergarten. And so we've had families that were waiting for us to open, and then their little boy, he's now in first grade or second grade even. And so that hurt my heart. That felt like a lost opportunity. But I will say that there's also been a lot of important work that has been done around community awareness, empowerment, and engagement, specifically in the African American community, which is where we are rooted and focused. And also through the MIPSAC partnership. And I could say a lot more about that, and maybe we'll get to those kind of questions later. But I mean, all of it has been purposeful. I'm standing on the back of your previous guest from Siembra and Make. And, like I'm standing on their back and very open about that. And there's been such synergy and support that has come from that. So what is happening here is powerful. It's impactful. I have the honor to be on MCM's board as well. And I speak to other board members who don't maybe have the same context that I do to truly understand how powerful this model and this work that we are doing is. And I know that there's so much more that is ahead, not only for Morning Glory, but for all of the schools and all of the guests as part of your podcast series.
Yes, you have wonderful community and very strong backs that you get to stand upon because they are doing amazing work as well. Now, I'm calling you Dr. Jackson, but I've heard Nora call you Dr. Tim. What do you prefer that I call you, sir?
Brother Tim, Pastor Tim, that's I am certainly not defined by my titles.
Okay.
But he likes Reverend Doctor now. All right, it's kind of new, but he's okay with it.
Let's go ahead, Reverend Doctor.
He earned it.
Absolutely. Listen, it's not a title; it's a name. It's like how do you feel comfortable with people addressing you, especially someone who's just getting to know you? I want to make sure that I'm saying the right thing. So, Reverend Doctor, we will say that for now. One of the things that I am learning very quickly is that Montessori principles are very specific and powerful. What values will Morning Glory share with the Montessori principles? I'm calling it like the Montessori way. And then what values kind of set you apart from where their schools are? and kind of the main path that they follow?
Great question. First, I want to just testify to the resilience, the vitality, the discipline, the focus, and the commitment to our children, Black children. My wife, Pastor Jess, and I'm getting emotional, as I was, focused on writing my dissertation and pastoring the church. She was really hunkered down with her mission to see this vision come to fruition. And so I just want to just give a shout out to my wife and her commitment to these children and picking up the baton from her mother, Ruby Hughes. This is a powerful, transformative justice work that she is called to do, and I'm blessed to join her. And I can't say that enough. The values that I see, that my role as the director of faith pedagogy is to provide a model for the guides to model within the Casa dei Bambini, the children's house. The disciplines that Howard Thurman presents, and the value that centering oneself and the relation between the individual and the child, and these principles that center us in this space that is sacred. It is not a proselytizing of the child. It is creating a space for the child to discover themselves, discover God in their way, and living from that center. My work centered on, as I stated earlier, Howard Thurman's spiritual disciplines for African American Montessori educators that mitigated against anti-Blackness and the criminalization of Black boys in early childhood education. And so I'm speaking to that in the work that I presented in my dissertation. And this is the why we are starting Morning Glory Montessori. The values of personhood, the values of selfhood, the values of the other, your neighbor, the values of the environment, right? Living from that center, an inclusive kind of a space where all lives matter, right? But really highlighting the I would say the disorientation that our children are experiencing in spaces that are culturally unresponsive, and really highlighting that and building on the roots of our ancestors, the Black church, where the church was this hub. Not only the church was the spiritual hub where formation was taking place, where hope was being nurtured and justice was being imagined, right? Equality, but education was at the center, and Black institutions, problem solving, a theology that moved out, that addressed the social ills of our community, right? And Howard Thurman and the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King would always argue that our Christian values pretty much hold this country to hold the country's feet to the principles or the ideal of democracy and equality for all. And so this is what we're presenting. These are the values. We want to make sure that the child has independence, that the child's personality is developed and formed historically and culturally, in a space where folks see them and value them and can affirm who they are as a human being. And so this is what our role is to get out of the way and to follow the child and to create a space where the child can explore and the child can discover this wonderment about themselves, about God in themselves, and how that moves out from themselves into their neighbors. And so we'll teach the spiritual practice of nonviolence, not for an outcome, such as civil disobedience, but nonviolence as a way of being, nonviolence with one another, nonviolence with the environment, right? Nonviolence as a way of being, non-injury, satyagraha, ahimsa. And so I'll say this piece: the intersectionality between Howard Thurman and Dr. Mira Montessori. They both journeyed to India in the 30s, and they sat with Gandhi. And Dr. Maria Montessori, she was exiled from Italy, and she actually became an Indian. She took on the culture of India, of the Indian people, and she sat with Gandhi. Thurman, as well as Dr. Maria Montessori, sat with Gandhi to kind of just sit with his philosophy around nonviolence. So these are the disciplines that we're going to model in the environment. And then it's this movement between God, self, nature, and the community. And so I'm just excited to be a part of it. This is our laboratory. This is our case study. Certainly children are not, not a scientific research initiative. But Dr. Maria Montessori sat in these environments to observe, and she gathered her quantitative and qualitative research observing children. And so I'll say this last point. I am a preacher, and I this is my second closing. that Christ presents a theology that centers around children. Jesus argued that we must become like the child if we want to be part of his kingdom. And so this is the ethics or the ethos in which we imagine this space to be and to experience, centering on the Montessori pedagogy.
Well, I think that's amazing. And I don't know that, thinking of our children as like science cases, I don't know that that's something that would come naturally. But what I do know is that when we think about the infant and early childhood mental health approach, everything that surrounds how our children are developed and raised really matters. And so having an institution like Morning Glory within our communities that will help bridge the gap, I think, between, kind of where we are as far as mental health in our children, emotional learning. It's not always about mental health, but sometimes it's just about emotional substance and learning how to move through what those feelings are, and teaching children that we can feel, that it's okay to feel. And as a matter of fact, here you can be safe feeling and sharing with us. And so to me, being able to be that place for young Black boys is so important. And Pastor Jess, we've talked a little bit about the values that we share and maybe go beyond what Montessori teaches, but talk now about that connection to community, because I know your approach to your commitment to community is going to be a little different because things are different in our communities. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about the programs that you're planning to have and the goals and the impacts that you want to see through that programming.
Thank you, Tawana. And thank you, honey, for sharing as you did around our values. A framework to think about how we are approaching what we're doing is what we call FAM. And it really kind of pulls together the different threads. And FAM, the acronym, stands for faith informed, Afrocentric, rooted in African American culture and history, and Montessori, high fidelity Montessori, as we have come to understand it through our training at the Montessori Center of Minnesota. And so we're the first school locally and nationally to pull together this confluence of things, of these three things. There are certainly Afrocentric Montessori schools around the country, primarily East Coast, West Coast. There are also faith-based or faith-informed, many of them Catholic, Montessori schools, but none that kind of bring these three elements together. So when you think about the holistic, that is a piece of what we are doing in so many ways. creating a space for holistic development for the child, but also holistic multi-generational connections for the family and with community. So we are blessed to be a part of the first cohort of grantees with the Department of Health and the new Office of African American Health that was recently formed. And so looking at social determinants, various social determinants of health within the African American community specifically. And of course, we of the 14 grantees are the only one that is squarely positioned within the early childhood education space. And so in terms of connecting with community, some of our programming as a part of our work with that department will be in bringing elders into our community. We have a multi-generational staff. One of the other people, and let me just back up a minute and say, when you told me that your podcast was called The Montessori Way, I was like, okay, this is another kind of like Molly Divine moment, because one of the very first things, and go back to the story that I shared earlier, one of the very first things I did when I graduated from training was to start a community awareness and empowerment campaign that we called, and it came to me in the shower, Blacks, Believers, and the Montessori Way, BBMW. And what we started doing through various community outreach and engagement events was kind of bringing different people together to talk about what Montessori is, different aspects. We did a piece on trauma. We did a national town hall where we brought Dr. Aize Sabater, who was AMI USA president, in. I mean, so we did a lot of things over these past 5 years, which, I was saying, the time was purposeful to build community, to build content awareness and knowledge about what Montessori is, and debunk some myths about what it's not, that I think are prevalent in maybe a lot of communities, but especially in African American community, that's just why am I going to pay to send my child somewhere when they just running around all day and doing whatever they want to do? Not understanding, what are we talking about? We're talking about freedom, the values of freedom within limits and independence, and how those things are building blocks to future confidence and competence in our children. And so, kind of debunking some things, sharing new information, all of that was a part of Blacks, Believers, in Montessori Way. And I mean, it still exists, and it's going to continue to be a part of our work. It was also a way to recruit. So we started drawing some people closer. And one of those people who was going to be a part of our founding staff was a sister who I've known forever. She also is a recovering attorney, if you will, but had been a long-term substitute in the Minneapolis Public Schools. And we were able to recruit her. She's an elder from the community, but she got primary trained and is going to be also a founding lead guide at the school. So we will have a multi-generational space with intentionality. We will, be very heavy in terms of parent engagement. That is going to be a really important piece for us, and we'll certainly be pulling on Nora's wisdom in terms of how we do that well, based on her work with the other MIPSAC schools, but really wanting to create ways to not only have community supports within what we do in the school, but also extend out beyond the walls of the school so that people feel supported and connected in ways that maybe they hadn't been before. And that includes, in terms of the Montessori pedagogy specifically, that M of fam, we want to extend Montessori values and principles into the home as much as possible as well. So we've got a lot to, we just had a staff meeting last night that was really robust and rich in terms of the things that we are envisioning and how we are going to kind of pull all these pieces together in a holistic way. And let me just say, as as to stress the point about Reverend Doctor's role and the work that he has done with Howard Thurman, will be centered on the adults primarily, not exclusively, but primarily. How do we support the caretakers of our children? We know, I know, hearing from others and experiencing connections with other schools, that burnout is real. And so mental health for our children necessarily includes mental health for those who are caring for the children. And so we're, his work with bringing Dr. Howard Thurman's voice. I mean, we started our staff meeting, and I don't know about other schools, but we start our staff meetings in prayer with meditations that center us and ground us. And we started that meeting yesterday with a Howard Thurman prayer that just released so much anxiety of the day that I personally was carrying. And so it shifted me. It just helped me shift. And having someone on point who is responsible for, that's your role to help us shift, to help us get grounded. And I'll just finally say that, so much of this journey over these past 5 years has brought me personally, and I think us collectively, to a place of valuing elder voices. I think we don't do well as a country in how we care for our children or our elders. And there's nothing new under the sun. We have had those that have gone before us that had tremendous wisdom on how to solve so many of the problems that we continue to face, including areas around mental health. And so, so I personally have been drawn to, or back to, I should say, Marian Wright Edelman's voice, and have embarked on a journey of reading all of her books, some of which I've read before, but others that I haven't. And it's just so amazing to me how those elder voices. So when I'm talking about elder voices, I'm not just talking about those who will be in the classroom and who I can touch and hug and hold and can engage with the children and each other, but those who have gone before, those voices like Howard Thurman, like Mary McLeod Bethune, like so many that have journeyed this journey around education, caring for our children, and meeting the needs of families and community. There's so much wisdom there. We don't have to reinvent it. We just need to listen, and then we need to apply. And so that is where, kind of my peace and mental health and wellness is coming from, and it's going to then be applied in the work that we do day in and day out with each other.
That's a wonderful part about infant and early childhood mental health that I've learned since I've been with MACMH is the approach. Is learning, first of all, how our children develop emotionally and mentally, and understanding where they should be at certain points in their lives. I don't know that many of us even understand that by the time your child is 6, they have developed all of those things. How well can they attach to people who aren't their caregivers? How does that attachment with the caregiver even dictate what happens, with attachment outside of the home? Like, there are so many things that we I believe, and this is just me personally, I feel, because this is my story, right? I didn't pay attention to my children's mental health when they were younger. My attitude was, until you have a job, you don't get an attitude. You don't have to pay bills.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to have an attitude. So I think back personally on how many opportunities I had that I missed with my children because of that attitude that I had.
Yes.
And so that's why I stand on this soapbox now. Like, let's first of all stop telling our children to suck it up.
Come on.
If we could just start there, that would be
Yes,
amazing.
that's good.
Yes.
That would be amazing. And so I appreciate, that's why I love the Montessori way. And then I've said this in every episode. I feel like I got to say it now. These are my opinions. They're not the opinions of MACMH. We're not endorsing Montessori principles in any way. We're just offering an opportunity for our audience to see something different, to show you a different way that you can help your child at the very beginning of their lives, because 0 to 6 is so important. And so the fact that you all are drawn to that space with an idea of community, of being self-confident, self-independent, but still bringing God into the conversation, which we don't see very often, that FAM approach is amazing. So I appreciate that. And Reverend Doctor, we've talked a little bit about the commitment to community and kind of the approach that you're going to have with your children and your families, and bridging the way we learn, going back to that knowing, especially Afrocentric. We always learn together. There were no classrooms of, when we learned together. The elders were there with all of the young people and everyone in between. So I really appreciate that. But Dr. Reverend, talk to us a little bit more about the barriers that parents may face in order to be able to send their children to Morning Glory Montessori. What are the barriers that you see that parents might say, hey, I would love to send my children there, but?
Well, it'd take another hour or two to talk about barriers, right? Systemically, the barriers, socioeconomic inequalities, the disparities. You've got Black families that, average income in Minnesota for Black families is probably $30,000. And that's at the poverty level. And so socioeconomic barriers, right? Barriers of this, what our educational system is presenting to our children, right? Trauma, mental health. These are barriers. Unfortunately, we are still grappling with the three evils: racism, exploitation, greed, and poverty, and and militarism, that affect Black families disproportionately than other families, right? And so those are barriers. The hope is that we are presenting, to my Pastor Jess's point, we are standing on the shoulders of our ancestors. They've done this. They've worked through the antebellum South. The abolitionists broke that barrier, that stronghold of oppression and enslavement. Got us through the Emancipation Signing Proclamation, 1863. Got us through Juneteenth. Got us through Reconstruction. Backlash, white backlash. We're going to call it what it is. Jim Crow, segregation. Got us through that. Voting rights, civil rights, Brown v. Board of Education. We're resilient folks, right? And the church is at the anchor or centers us, our faith, our spirituals, right? Our testimonies of, how we made it over, right? And so we're reimagining what does that look like and adding the component to Montessori. And we know that families are dealing with these struggles. And so this is why it's so important that we build relationship and community and identify these barriers and struggles and sit and have a listening ear, as Howard Thurman, that's a Howard Thurman term, and just sit with parents and build relationship and build trust and listen to them and listen to their stories and not judge them based on their social or economic context. And so this is why we're starting Morning Glory Montessori, to just offer a new space, a new environment, that addresses some of these issues, and to offer high fidelity Montessori to Black families. And I really love the Black Believers Montessori way that opens up a space for families who are struggling, and not just families who are maybe at the lower end of the social economic ladder, but you have professional families, Black families, who are placing their children in these spaces, and they're experiencing anti-Black and Black body violence that's causing, it's a psychological warfare. It is a murdering of the social development and the spiritual formation of the child, and they can afford these institutions or these tuitions. And so these are the barriers, these are the issues. And will Morning Glory solve all the problems? No. Our goal is to center on the children that are present in our learning environment, to love them and to love their parents, and to walk with them and journey with them these first from infant. We're starting with 3 to 6, to journey with them these 3 years, and then just kind of reimagine what that looks like after they spend time with us those 3 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's take a minute, because we just hit the hour mark, and that's really kind of, my goal, to not keep y'all much further than an hour. But I want to make sure that we talk a little bit, Pastor Jess, about how you are funding your passion. How are you growing your baby? And then the funding that you've already received, maybe what you're looking for, and what's still needed. How can the community support what you're doing there?
Well, how have we funded this baby being born? I guess it's similar to a lot of other families when they're having babies. It's almost by faith. But over these years, I've learned to be a grant writer. So we have built some funding relationships with different foundations here and there. But the biggest piece, and this is where we started, was with individuals who are kindred spirits. And we started with a GoFundMe in, I think it was 2020. And raised $16,000, which we used to set up our 501c3 and some other infrastructure pieces. And I think we were wise in the way in which we invested early on. We sought a Propel nonprofit grant, and that was 18 months of focus on infrastructure. And so we have a really strong foundation and organizational infrastructure now that can support us. And now we have over 200 individual donors that have contributed to Morning Glory on some level. And now we're trying to increase the number of those people that would be reoccurring donors to help us sustain what we're doing. We set up a scholarship. Pastor Tim talked about socioeconomics as a barrier. We are a private, nonprofit institution, so we do have tuition. Now, we know that there's increased focus legislatively around supporting families in need, but some of the guidelines around that, you have to be very economically challenged in order to qualify and be eligible. So we know there's plenty of families that make too much to be eligible and get help, but don't make enough to not need help. And so we launched at our spiritual grand opening in April, Ruby L. Hughes Scholarship Fund. And so we are already trying to raise scholarship dollars that can go towards supporting those families that are maybe in the middle, that want to avail themselves of this kind of educational environment for their children, but can't get any subsidies or other help and can't afford it all by themselves. So those are some of the things that we've done to try and support what we're doing. The biggest piece that from an expenditure standpoint of how we have had to fund this vision was the facility. And there's a whole long story about that, which I won't go into, but ultimately we've raised and expended over $500,000 to renovate space that is ADA compliant, that meets all of the DHS requirements, fire safety and everything else, to be licensable for Morning Glory, and our first children's house that will accommodate up to 30 children. So that's big. We are just on the cusp of finishing that, but we're about $90,000 short of paying for that, and kind of having that in the rearview mirror so that we don't have to continue to figure out how do we pay that as we're trying to pay livable wages to staff and support some of these other programming pieces that we have envisioned. So that's where we are right now. If anybody wants to write a check for 90 grand, Morning Glory Montessori is who you make it payable to. We'll get a tax charitable donation statement at the end of the year. And we would be most grateful. But any level of support, and again, it's really wonderful to know that we started with just a handful of people and a GoFundMe, and now have a Bloomerang database that is functioning in a way that supports our engagement with well over 200 people, and the diverse people that don't even share our same faith values that are supporting us. We have neighbors around us in the Seward neighborhood who very explicitly don't share. I mean, one neighbor says, I'm an atheist. So he clearly does not share the same view that we have around faith, but is tremendously supportive of, in fact, a reoccurring donor. So what we have been able to do is share the compelling need for this. And, a blind person can see that. When you look at our prison system in Minnesota and how we top the country in incarcerating Black men, and I'll just focus there, over a whole lot of other places.
Wow.
I mean, that's a pretty dubious distinction, right?
Yes,
to say that Minnesota tops the country in how many Black men we incarcerated per capita and what have you. And so, we have to stop talking about dismantling the cradle to prison pipeline and actually do it. And so,
Amen.
That's what we're on. And people are responding from all different walks of life. Some who clearly share our values around faith, others who share our values around Afrocentric culture and history, others who share our commitment to providing high fidelity Montessori, and then some who maybe don't feel necessarily connected to any of it, but they see the need as a community, as a broader community, that we are a Titanic. So if Black men and boys go down, we all go down.
Absolutely.
And they're involved to help. So
amen. Yeah. Well said.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Can I add on to that?
Yes, please, Nora.
I think so often when we talk about children of color, and especially Black children, it's coming from a deficit model of like, here are the achievement gaps, here's the opportunity gaps, this is where everything is going wrong. And so I think the beauty of Morning Glory Montessori is that they're walking into an environment that is culturally relevant, where they immediately feel like they belong. And one of the core tenets of Montessori is to help children to become and to belong. And that is really the transformational point for these children. And to flip that on its head and be coming from a strengths-based model of you are valued here, you are seen, and you are important is truly the change that is happening. And the one statistic that I think we really need to pay attention to, I was looking at the most recent Minnesota 2023 Early Childhood Workforce Survey, and 96% of the workforce is white, and only 1% of the workforce identifies Black or African American. And I think that is, as an early childhood community, we really need to look at that. Like 1%, that's
Wow.
unacceptable.
Yes.
And we know that our African American women are some of the most incredible nurturers and caregivers, and historically have done the child rearing for a lot of our society. So we really need to look at what have we done to push out those incredibly highly skilled, intelligent, nurturing women and men out of the early childhood workforce, and really provide an opportunity to welcome them back into the workforce where they are valued as well. And so and so that when these Black children walk into an environment, they see themselves reflected in the people that are caring for them and nurturing for them and guiding them into through their development. 90% of the brain is developed by age 5. We need to really do some self-reflection as an early childhood community and look at how we are bringing more women of color back into the workforce, and men of color, to be quite frank. So,
Amen.
And here at MCM, we have 40% of our graduates are people of the global majority, and so we're really proud of that. And there's so much work to do. So,
yes. And listen, Laura, I always appreciate when you say that global majority. Like, I have to say that you are probably the only non-melanated person I know that even that knows that term and knows what it means. So thank you, Nora. Thank you for that. Are you doing anything, Pastor Tim, Pastor Jess, to recruit people of color to be teachers? I know that there's special training that teachers need to be, that your staff has to have in order to join your school. Are you doing anything special to recruit?
Yeah. Well, did you?
Yeah, I want to just say one thing in regards to that. I have been, I've gone through the orientation teacher's assistant part of the training, and I plan on going through the AMI training next fall.
Awesome.
My mission, part of my, to build on my dissertation work, is to recruit Black men and to go on this crusade of recruiting African-American men to go through the training, AMI training, to become AMI trained guides. And so that will be my justice imagination, my moral work around kind of recruitment. But I have to go first and lead by example. And so that's what I envision for my role.
Awesome. That's one of the things that I've noticed since I've been here with MACMA, as I engage at different conferences and different opportunities where I get to table and meet people, is the lack of diversity in many of the rooms. I think is definitely one of the things that you see right away. So being able to step into a space that like, I've been here, I've done that, and this is what you're going to do and how it's going to improve your life, and welcome to our family. So thank you so much for that. You're listening to a Minnesota Association for Children's Mental Health podcast. We're leading with knowledge, compassion, and support. Please take a moment, follow our channel, subscribe, and turn on those notifications for future episodes. All right, so as we prepare to leave, I just want to ask a couple of questions for maybe all of you, because Nora, I'm not sure that I've asked this question of you, but tell the audience the best part of what you do. What's the best part of what you do?
So I think the best part of what I do is some of the fundamental pieces that I've learned about Montessori. Maria Montessori's foundational reading is called The Absorbent Mind. And so we know that children's minds are That's my husband commenting, but I think he's the one
Good
here
husband,
right now.
good husband.
But how
Very good
important how important the prepared environment is for children. And so, I see it reflected in my own son in how I parent, and in seeing his growth and development just flourish from having a space where he can be independent and he can take that ownership. And this week he's moving out of the toddler environment and into the children's house. He's turning 3. And, he came home and was so proud that he made a pizza bagel this week, and he got to put on the tomato apron, and he got to spread his sauce and then put the pepperoni on. He had to blow on it because it was too hot before he could eat it. So, but I don't just see that in my own child. I see that in all the children that I get to see, both at Cornerstone and all of the partner schools that I visit. It's so rewarding to see children so proud of themselves, so proud of who they are, so proud of who they are becoming, and so connected to their community. And like, I just have chills just thinking about my last 6+ years here, and really getting to experience that through a child's eye. And it's just been very profound on me as an adult working in these spaces. So.
Thank you for sharing that. I got goosebumps, and I just wanted to put Coach's comment up here. Coach Leah, I don't know if you remember me, but I know you from way back, and so I just wanted to make sure that we put Coach's comment up here for you too. No questions, but just a great comment.
Beautiful,
for y'all.
Beautiful.
Reverend Doctor, give me the best part of what you do.
Well, first, shout out to Coach Leah. She and I grew up together in the same neighborhood. So,
what? That's awesome.
Yeah, small world. The best part of what I do is I get to work alongside my wife in our sacred mission for working with children. Howard Thurman would often say, "What makes you come alive?" Ask the question, what makes you come alive? What makes you come alive? Whatever that is, go do it. And what has made me come alive is walking alongside my wife over 20 years, working in our ministry, and now moving into this educational space for our children. That's the best part of what I do. And I'm super excited to roll up my sleeves and kneel down with the children as I work with the guides in the learning environment. So that's the best part of my life and my journey.
Oh, that's so sweet. My parents worked together too, and probably if you asked them, they'd say the same thing. They were just such a dynamic duo, and so it's lovely to hear that. Lovely to hear that. And I love that you call it what makes you come alive. That's a different way of just saying, what's your purpose? So what's your purpose? What makes you come alive? I love it. I love it. I love it. Pastor Jess, the best part of what you do.
Well, hard to come behind these two. I could easily just say ditto to both of them, and I do truly love working with my husband, and also working in community and seeing the fruit of that in the lives of our children. I was thinking about it, and I thought I think that it almost goes full circle back to kind of your introduction and the different things that I've done in my life. And the best part of what I'm doing right now really is this confluence, the opportunity to kind of bring all of what I have done and have passion around to support our children in growing and developing and becoming who God created them to be. I remember which is a holistic experience for me. I don't have to just be this or just be that or just bring this or just focus on that. That actually this is kind of a life confluence of everything that I have been passionate about. I've always been passionate about justice. I've always been engaged in these spaces around African American culture and history. I've always been trying to solve problems and doing it in this way or that way, building institutions. I'm a daughter of entrepreneurs. I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. So I think the best part of what I am doing is everything that I get the opportunity to do and everything that I get to bring. And that's a gift. That is very much a gift. I am honored and grateful to God for that kind of holistic opportunity to be my whole self and to allow the children, as we follow them and respect them and support their development, to be their whole selves as well. So that's what I would say.
Amazing time that we've had. And I still feel like we probably could talk another hour, but we are well past an hour now. So I want to give you all part of your day back and just say thank you again to Pastor Jess, Dr. Jackson, and Nora. I appreciate you carving this time out of your very busy schedule. I'm sure you're very busy. And so the fact that you're taking the time out to be here with me today, I really appreciate that.
Thank you for all you're doing and everything with this podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And listen, I may be reaching out to you for July, for a podcast series I'm doing in July, especially you, Reverend Doctor. I really think that you should be involved in my next podcast series. I'll talk a little bit about it at the end of the show here, but I'll reach out to you specifically about it because I would love for you to be a part of that as well. So again, thank you. I'm going to take you all out of the screen now and just wrap up. If you want to hang tight, we can connect a little bit as soon as I'm done with all of that. It's housekeeping stuff. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank
you, Nora,
Morning
for
Glory
making this
Montessori.
happen.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. And so I really, really appreciate being able to have these conversations in front of an audience. These are conversations that I have a lot as I'm out in the community, engaging through MACMH and the wonderful work that we do. And I loved this whole podcast series, and specifically Morning Glory Montessori. But in general, the whole point was to bring something different to communities. I don't know how many of you know about Montessori schools. I'm just learning about them. And so I always assume that if I'm learning something new, there are probably a lot of other people in the community who are learning something new as well. And so being able to share the fact that they take the infant and early childhood mental health principles and apply them to the way they do things at Montessori is really important for me to convey to you all. Infant and early childhood mental health is important. I think it's really imperative that we begin to look at our children's development and understand them a little bit more. And the more that we understand their development, maybe those of us who've had some challenges in our adulthood can also learn and start connecting to, maybe this I can do differently. Maybe that I can do differently. So even though we look at infant and early childhood, I think that the messages are true for adults as well. And through Morning Glory Montessori, just the fact that their FAM approach, faith, Afrocentric, Montessori approach to being able to develop young children, the holistic development that they're bringing, the multi-generational connections for family and community that Morning Glory is bringing to the table is amazing. Please find them online. morningglory.org, I believe, is what their website was. Find out more about them, see how you can support them, or find out ways that they can support you and your family and your child's development. Maybe Montessori schools is an option for you that you never thought that you had. And the more I learn about them, the more I appreciate what they offer as alternative to daycare providers. I also appreciate their intentional pursuit to partner with schools of diverse communities. We've talked to Cornerstone with Molly and with Nora. We've had a conversation with Siembra, Montessori American Indian Childcare Center, and then here with Morning Glory Montessori. These schools are in culturally specific neighborhoods who are there to embrace your child, to hug them and care about them and develop them in a way that I believe we need to start looking at doing things differently. So thank you again. Let me just let you know our next MACMH's community podcast series is Black Boys Healing. There are mental health challenges specific to young Black boys that are not being addressed. We must begin to offer them permission to engage and offer them safe spaces where they can be vulnerable. In this 4-part series, we'll have a panel that will discuss and provide tangible instruction on how we can work together to heal our communities. Black Boys Healing will be streaming live every Friday in July at 10 a.m. on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page. So again, share all the wonderful things about what we're doing here. This was our first series. We're just wrapping it up. Thank you so much for joining us throughout this journey. We really, really appreciate you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.